Robbie Wyerdicht, Dwayne Johnson, a student at Central High School, is dancing and lip-syncing to En Vogue's My Lovin' while taking a shower. Dylan Boyak's character, Trevor Olson, leads a bunch of high school bullies who enter the building and taunt Robbie for being overweight and nerdy. Calvin, the Golden Jet, Joiner, Kevin Hart, the senior class's most well-liked student, is being honored during a school assembly as this is happening. Robbie is carried into the gym by Trevor and his men, who then slide him over the floor while barefoot. Robbie is ridiculed by everyone except Calvin, who offers him his jacket so he can hide. Robbie exits the gym in complete disgrace. Calvin still works in accounting 20 years later, but he despises it. He recently received a promotion above his old helper. Maggie, Danielle Nicolay, Calvin's high school sweetheart, and their marriage haven't exactly been having the best of times lately. Additionally, their high school reunion is approaching, and Calvin worries that he reached his pinnacle in high school and that the rest of his life has been a downward spiral. Calvin declines a Facebook invite to the reunion while at work. A little while afterwards, Bob Stone sends him a friend request. After that, he receives a strange phone call, but it's actually Maggie. Then Bob Stone begins messaging Calvin to extend an invitation to meet for a drink. He claims to be Robbie Wyerdicht in actuality. Calvin reluctantly consents to the invitation. As Calvin approaches the bar, he is shocked to see Robbie entirely changing into a muscular male. The two converse over cocktails. A man approaches and swoops in to grab Bob's seat while he steps out for a second. Calvin asks the man to return it, but the man's friends threateningly take a position. They must apologize for disrespecting Calvin, says Bob when he returns. The gun is in the hands of one of the thugs. In less than 10 seconds after taking his shot, Bob just declares, "I don't like bullies," and then kicks all of their asses. Calvin exits the bar with Bob, still buzzing from what he just seen. For a trip down memory lane, they visit their former high school. They come across a trophy case with a photo of Darla McGuckian, a girl who Bob had a crush on, and was known for having 2 lazy eyes, as well as a trophy case displaying all of Calvin's accomplishments. Bob is reminded of the worst day of his life when he passes past the guy's locker area. He is consoled by Calvin, who then yanks him out of the area. Later, the two take a stroll back to Calvin's home. Bob states that he needs Calvin's assistance with anything related to Calvin's line of business before they part ways. To use the computer, Bob enters his home. They stumble uncover documents relating to a bidding war and satellite codes. Before they can see more, Bob accidentally spills beer on Calvin's laptop. Then he requests a place to stay. Calvin grudgingly agrees to let him. A group of CIA officers led by Pamela Harris, Amy Ryan, who is searching for Bob, arrive at Calvin's door in the morning. The agents walk in after Calvin claims to be on the couch. There is no sign of Bob. Calvin is informed by Harris that Bob is wanted for a murder and a treasonous plot. In case Calvin makes touch with Bob, the agents follow him to work. Bob phones Calvin and confirms that he is indeed inside the structure. While Harris directs the agents to that particular floor, Bob is actually concealed in Calvin's office. Bob explains that he works for the CIA and that those seeking the satellite codes are prepared to kill to obtain them. They will be picked up by an Uber in 6 minutes, according to Bob's request. He plans his subsequent actions accordingly. Calvin's tie is taken by Bob, who then ties it around the ceiling sprinkler. He then sets it ablaze before Calvin dashes outside to let everyone know that Bob is there. The agents rush up and begin shooting at Bob, but the man easily strikes back and renders the majority of the agents helpless. Harris and the other agents then surround him and Calvin. The sprinklers turn on just in time for Bob to escape with Calvin on a mail cart and jump out a window. They take off in the Uber after landing on the company's airborne balloons. In order to take the GPS out of the car, Bob drives Calvin to a secure location. Bob explains to Calvin how he has been set up since his partner Phil, Aaron Paul, was abandoned to be bombed while confined in a lift, and Bob has been blamed for it. Since Calvin is the only person Bob has faith in, he needs Calvin's assistance since he thinks someone going by the code name, Black Badger, is looking for the satellite codes in order to carry out some evil scheme. The assassin arrives on a motorbike. Calvin takes the motorbike and abandons Bob when Bob knocks the guy off. He advises Maggie to stay away from home in a phone conversation. Harris arrives in a van and forces Calvin to get in as he starts to leave. She accuses Bob of being dangerous and turns his tail around to claim that he was the one who betrayed Phil and planned his death. She offers Calvin a gadget to use to let them know Calvin has found Bob. At the office of Dr. Dan, a marriage counselor who is actually Bob, Calvin meets Maggie. Calvin is made out to be a horrible man who is harming his and Maggie's relationship during a session. After Maggie has left, Calvin warns Bob that he will call Harris. Bob is aware that he wouldn't act in such manner. The two of them visit a person who can assist them in their mission's office. Sadly for Bob, this individual is Trevor Olson, who is currently Jason Bateman. Trevor brings up the event that has traumatized Bob after getting them what they require. The heartfelt apologies Trevor gives Bob after claiming to have found religion is immediately retracted because it was a lie. He still thinks nothing of Bob and is a dick. Bob is poised to kick Calvin's ass but he freezes and decides to go. Calvin receives a call from Harris as they are leaving the office warning him to give Bob to them immediately or else something bad will happen to Maggie. Bob and Calvin later meet outside. Bob claims that Calvin was his one and only buddy, which makes it more difficult for them both when the agents show up and take them into custody. Bob and Calvin are being held at the CIA's main office. By breaking one of Bob's fingers, the agents begin to torture him in an effort to extract information. Regretfully, Calvin fights back and frees Bob while putting the other agents in handcuffs. After regretting his actions, Calvin decides he still wants to assist Bob. After forgiving him, Bob offers him a high five before noticing his misplaced finger. Pops it back into position. Bob and Calvin find out where the criminals plan to purchase the satellite codes. They send a plane to the location, but Bob claims it is out of fuel. They prepare to crash land. Calvin admits that he regrets not having children. After faking the circumstance to induce Calvin to communicate his anxieties, while under great stress, Bob then raises the plane once more. Bob enters the store by himself and says to Calvin, "I'll see you on the other side," much as he did to Phil just before he passed away. When Calvin sees Harris arrive at the scene, he assumes she is Black Badger. When Calvin arrives to the buy location, he discovers Bob negotiating with the buyer, Thomas Kretschmann. Calvin is shot by Bob, but he just grazes him in the neck. The real Black Badger makes an appearance to strike a bargain. It's Phil, who claims to possess the authentic satellite codes. He and Bob debate over who the true Black Badger is, and Phil makes fun of Bob's favorite films, Roadhouse and 16 Candles. Calvin, Bob, and Phil are left to flee after Harris and her agents arrive and begin firing at the buyer and his goons. In the end, Calvin swipes the codes. The three are all situated on a little bridge. Bob and Phil are the targets of Calvin's gun, which he is holding in his hands. Although he shoots Bob in the leg, he keeps the rifle pointed towards Phil. According to Phil, he set Bob up and pretended to die because he was fed up with Bob being like a dickhead and constantly gushing about how Calvin was his hero. Bob pulls out Phil's throat, exactly like in Roadhouse, and pushes him into the river before Phil has a chance to kill Calvin. Calvin is shot by Bob, who says he's sorry and that he had to make it look real. Harris accepts the codes from the guys and thanks them for their assistance. Harris arranges for them to be flown to the reunion once Bob's reputation has been cleared. Once there, they encounter Maggie. Calvin pledges to help their relationship flourish. The trio arrives at the gathering. There is a new prom king, and his name is Bob. Maggie learns that Calvin won the award after hacking into the school's voting system. When Trevor and his friends approach Bob to make fun of him, he won't have any of it and delivers a punch that he's been waiting to deliver for 20 years. Bob enters the platform and makes a statement in which he declares that he has learned to embrace who he is and that Calvin is his friend. He then begins to undress, no longer feeling self-conscious. The others applaud him. Then Melissa McCarthy's Darla McGuckian approaches Bob. He removes her spectacles and declares that she is gorgeous just the way she is. The two then kiss. The two continue to dance. Months later, Maggie is expecting their first child together. Bob shows up to pick up Calvin and hang out. He returns Calvin's blazer, which he had given him 20 years before. The two depart after that.